Hi, one excellent strategy for reading is to scan and notice before you read. So let's talk about what that looks like. I've selected a sample reading, Just Walk On by Brent Staples. To scan, you read the introduction, each topic sentence of the body paragraphs, and the conclusion. So the first and last paragraph and the first sentence of every body paragraph. So I would start out like this. My first victim was a woman, white, well dressed, probably in her early 20s. I came upon her late one evening on a deserted street in Hyde Park, a relatively affluent neighborhood in an otherwise mean, impoverished section of Chicago. As I swung onto the avenue behind her, there seemed to be a discreet, uninflammatory distance between us. Not so. She cast back a worried glance. To her, the youngish black man, a broad 6 feet 2 inches with a beard and billowing hair, both hands shoved into the pockets of a bulky military jacket, seemed menacingly close. After a few more quick glimpses, she picked up her pace and was soon running in earnest. Within seconds, she disappeared into a cross street. That was more than a decade ago. I was 22 years old, a graduate student newly arrived at the University of Chicago. In that first year, my first away from my hometown, I was to become thoroughly familiar with the language of fear. I moved to New York nearly 2 years ago, and I have remained an avid night walker. After dark, on the Warren-like streets of Brooklyn where I live, I often see women who fear the worst from me. It is not altogether clear to me how I reached the ripe old age of 22 without being conscious of the lethality nighttime pedestrians attributed to me. As a boy, I saw countless tough guys locked away. I have since buried several, too. The fearsomeness mistakenly attributed to me in public places often has a perilous flavor. Relatively speaking, however, I never fared as badly as another black male journalist. Over the years, I learned to smother the rage I felt at so often being taken for a criminal. And on late evening constitutionals, I employ what has proved to be an excellent tension-reducing measure. I whistle melodies from Beethoven and Vivaldi and the more popular classical composers. Even steely New Yorkers hunching toward nighttime destinations seem to relax, and occasionally they even join in the tune. Virtually everybody seems to sense that a mugger wouldn't be warbling bright sunny selection from Vivaldi's Four Seasons. It is my equivalent of the cowbell that hikers wear when they know they are in bear country. So I've just scanned the reading by reading the entire introduction, the first sentence of all the body paragraphs, and the entire conclusion. This is what I will mean in this class by scanning. The next step is noticing, in which I would ask you to write down 3 to 5 sentences of just little things that jumped out after you scanned the reading. For example, I might write down, I notice the vocabulary is fairly high level. Words like Warren-like streets, or perilous, or conscious, fearsomeness, um, even this last line about late evening constitutionals, instead of just saying my late night walks. So my first notice sentence might be, I notice the vocabulary is high level, and maybe I would give 3 examples using words such as Warren-like, perilous, and constitutionals. That's one thing I notice. Uh, the second thing I notice is that it's a first-person story or narrative. He keeps saying I. He's talking about his own experiences. So I might write, I notice it's a first-person narrative. And what's one other thing I noticed from this? Well, I noticed words like talks about fear, but it also talks about rage, smothering rage, fearsomeness. Um, so I noticed there's sort of a theme of fear and rage in it. Women running away, um, whistling to try to calm people down on the street. So I notice a theme or a mood. That's another thing you can notice. Then I would go back to the reading now that I have scanned and noticed, and I would read it all the way through, including the first section, which is a little biography about Brent Staples, the writer, and then I would reread the introduction and the entire reading, now having really primed my brain to be able to take in at a much deeper level the entire reading, and that is scan, notice, and read.